If you want to be a better stock trout fishing angler, I have just the 10 advanced trout fishing tips just for you. So if you want to become the best local stock trout fishing angler, you better incorporate these advanced tips, and we're starting out the list at number 10. Now, starting out the list is to fish and learn multiple different techniques. And when it comes to stock trout fishing, you've got different types of techniques and setups you can use to catch stock trout. Now, the common techniques are casting, bobber fishing, or plunking off the bottom. Now, you can't fish every technique on every body of water, but if you're going to become a really good stock trout fishing angler, you need to know how to fish with each one of these techniques really, really well. And for me, when I'm going out stock trout fishing, I have a rod rigged up for a bobber rod, a Carolina rig for plunking off the bottom, and I also have a rod for casting any spinners or spoons at any time. When you're approaching a body of water for the first time, you want to see how the water is doing when it comes to color and shape, and maybe where the fish are located. If they're higher in the water or lower in the water, if they're busting the surface, you're going to want to start out with one technique and then go from there. But if you only bring the gear for one fishing technique, you're very much limiting yourself to how you can catch the trout. And the best thing you can do is have rods rigged up for every single technique. And to become really good at catching stock trout, you need to be really, really good at fishing in each of the techniques. Get really good at your casting with the bobbers, or if you're casting with spinners, to have precision accuracy casting, you really want to get good at. And especially in little creeks and little streams and small bodies of moving water, this is where casting is going to be really, really important. So the more you can master those three techniques, the more you're going to see your increase in the number of trout that you're going to catch. Now, coming in at tip number 9 is to mix trout doughs together. Now, on occasion, this is something that I do regularly, which is to take trout dough from one jar and trout dough from another jar and mix them together to form one ball of bait on your hook when you're plunking. Berkley, Zeeks, or Potski have jars of bait, and there's more out there on the market, but one of the things you can do is to combine them together to form a single bait. And I love to do this with different colors and different scents. Now, one of my favorites is to use the yellow corn with either orange or chartreuse garlic with some glitter. Now, you get a little bit of the corn, which is the bait flavor that most of the hatcheries feed the trout, and then you've got garlic, which is a really good scent when the water's warming up in the spring and in the summer. The trout absolutely go nuts for it. If you're fishing with kids, you can really play around and let them mix different doughs together to form that one, what I would call the uber magnificent trout dough that you're going to present to the trout. And if you're mixing baits together, be really careful about getting glitter all over you. Don't ask me how I know. Now, coming in at tip number 8 is to fish trout magnet and jigs in really high pressured areas. If you're on public water out stock trout fishing, you're going to be up against a lot of different combinations. And for the most part, you're going to see the common baits like people casting spinners or spoons. You're going to see night crawlers, worms, power bait, maybe some eggs, the usual baits that you're going to see. However, if you really want to stand out from the crowd, grab a trout magnet or a jig under a bobber, and those could be some of the most effective baits that you can use for stock trout fishing when there are a lot of people around and when the fish have a lot of baits to choose from. For me, it's because it's the grub-like action of the trout magnet, and you got jigs that you can float under a bobber in little moving pockets of water that are really going to be what the trout are going to go after. And by adding something like a Procure water soluble scent to the trout magnets or the jigs, you can be able to present something in front of them with a little bit of scent, and that's going to fire the trout up a lot, especially in that little moving pockets of water. And my recommendation is start to fish with those types of baits in pressured areas, and you should start to see your hookup and land ratio increase. Now, coming in at tip number 7 is you need to adjust based off of what the water is doing. And this to me is a big thing. Now, when you're going out to hit the water, if it's a little pond, a creek, a stream, a lake, a massive reservoir, you need to pay attention to what the water is like. How clear is the water? Now, we're talking about the height of the water, the clarity. What are the conditions like? Is it super dirty? Is there a lot of debris in the water? That's going to give you a huge advantage to understand where and how to fish for stock trout. I see a lot of anglers just show up to a body of water, they just grab their rod out, they're fishing with the same old stuff over and over again, and they're not paying attention to what the water is looking like out there. And this is a big deal because in off-colored water, or even water that's rising or dropping very significantly, that's going to impact the types of baits and scents and where the fish are going to be. So even before I make my first cast, I'm seeing what the water is doing. So tip when you get to where you're fishing, look at the water and then make your ultimate decisions on what to fish and how to fish. Now, coming in at tip number 6 is to match the bait that you're fishing with the hatchery fish that these stock trout are getting fed. And this is especially true right after the trout are stocked. You want to be fishing with something in the brown, white, black, dark green, maybe even some dark blue type of colors, something that's more natural. This is where fishing natural baits, where the trout are going to see those different colors of the food that they're getting fed, and they're more likely to bite those natural colored baits. A lot of times, and I'm very guilty of this myself, which is I want to fish the super bright, the super dense colors like the chartreuse, the red, the yellow, the oranges. That's the type of stuff that I really like to fish. However, after trout are recently stocked, actually going more natural can be a huge advantage to helping you catch more trout. So as you're changing baits and as you're changing colors, go to something with a little bit more natural at the start, and then try to start experiment and go to more of those brighter types of colors. Now, one thing I love to do is adding corn to my natural colored baits, something like pumpkin green or hatchery pellet brown trout power bait from Berkeley. I love to add the sweet corn Pro Cure gel to those, and that can be a really, really good combination, especially as the trout are looking for that natural bait and it's got corn scent. It's the perfect combination to catch stock trout right after they've been stocked. Now, coming in at tip number 5 is to research new locations. I can't underestimate this enough, that doing some research, even just a little bit, helps tremendously in terms of your success. Now, whether you're new into stock trout fishing, you go every year, or you're more an advanced level stock trout fishing angler, you still want to go research new places that you're going to fish for a couple reasons. One, you should figure out where you should be fishing, like on the bank, in little creeks and little streams. What are the best high target spots that you should be fishing? Secondly, it gives you an advantage, especially if you're hiking into places that you know where you are on the map to stay safe, so you're not walking on private property, but also you're walking to really remote and maybe far out locations where there's gonna be a lot of trout that a lot of other anglers won't want to get to. And thirdly, using lake or say reservoir maps, you're gonna be able to see the topography and see where the water is deep, where it drops off, and that's gonna give you some hints and clues as to where you should be fishing, say when you're trolling for trout or if you're fishing from the bank. Now, coming in at tip number 4, this should be a pretty obvious one, but a lot of times I see anglers who don't necessarily follow this tip, which is to varying your speed of your retrieve. And this is really true when it comes to fishing with bobbers or casting with spinners or spoons. Now, one of the things that's really easy to get comfortable in is just casting out there and just getting into a normal routine that you use over and over again, whether it's casting a spinner and you're just retrieving at the same rate every single time. Maybe you're casting in different locations, but the speed of the retrieve is still the same every single time. And if you really want to get better at stock trout fishing, you have to vary up your speed. Sometimes the trout in the colder water, they want a slower retrieve. Sometimes in the warmer water, they may want a really fast or a faster retrieve or a lot of motion in the water so they can go chase a bait. So be very cognizant and aware of how you're casting and how fast you're retrieving in, because that could make a big difference in terms of getting no bites to finding the right retrieve speed or changing it up. And that's when the trout may go absolutely nuts. Now, coming in at tip number 3 has to do with bobbers, and that is to make sure you have an adjustable bobber when you're float fishing. Now, for me, one of the challenges I've had over the years is to understand the depth of, say, pools of water in little lakes, creeks, streams that I'm fishing, and trying to understand when I'm fishing with a bobber where your bait is in terms of the strike zone and if you're in the right zone or not. And one of the best ways you can overcome that is to have a bobber that's adjustable, either a slip float bobber or it's a fixed bobber that you can move up and down the line. I like to use the Addicted Mustad bobbers that have some little rubber stops that I can move up and down the line to adjust the depth of my bait very, very quickly. And for a couple reasons, this is great because one, you can cast out there and see if the fish are gonna bite. And if there's nothing there, maybe make your leader a little bit longer by moving the bobber up. And then again, you can always adjust it to be smaller. Say if you're hitting the bottom and your leader length is too long between your bobber and your bait and you're just tapping on the bottom, you might not be in the strike zone. So having a bobber that you can manage and manipulate and move and adjust a lot is a big deal when bobber fishing. You're not going to throw it out there and just hope that a trout shows up. No, you need to be making adjustments constantly, and I would say in 6-inch increments, either making it longer or shorter to find the right strike zone of where the trout are hanging out. Now, coming in at tip number 2 is to time your trip around low pressure systems. Now, if there's a storm about to roll into your area, that's the best time to go catch some stock trout, when the bite is on and it's super high. Because when storms roll through, just like bass or other species, the bite tends to slow down and stop very easily when those bigger high pressure and stormy systems try to come in. As you're stock trout fishing, if you can get out on the water and catch some trout before those storms try to roll in those low pressure weather systems, that's when you really want to go focus and get after the trout. And one tip, make sure you bring your waterproof gear before that low pressure system, because if it comes in really quickly, you might be stuck in the downpour, and that is no fun. Now that we got through tips 10 through 2, what is tip number 1 of the advanced stock trout fishing tips? Well, that is to not be in a hurry. Now, when it comes to stock trout fishing, we can feel like we want to be in a hurry. We don't want to get to the water. We want to cast really quickly. We want to just get to fishing. But sometimes just slowing down can actually make the biggest difference. And in small bodies of water, little creeks, little streams, little ponds, take your time and make really good, really solid casts. You don't have to be cast in a hurry, retrieve really quickly and move on to the next hole. Like, take your time. Sometimes being methodical and slow and being very precise in your casting, your bait choosing, take a minute to think about what the water's presented in front of you and what you want to fish with can ultimately make the biggest difference. And don't be in a hurry. Remember, fishing is fun. Take your time, get out there, make a good cast every single time, and that's going to pay dividends over the long haul. So there you guys have it, the top 10 advanced stock trout fishing tips. Hope you guys got some new information from today's video that you can apply out on the water and help you catch more stock trout, or even your personal best. And if you're looking for more stock trout fishing tips and information, I got a couple videos right here that are perfect to help you become a better stock trout fishing angler. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and until next time, if you ain't losing gear, you ain't fishing.